Well, we're back in my office now. I actually moved out of here because I couldn't close the shade anymore because it's been taken down because what holds it broke, and I've been waiting to do that again so I can film during the day on days when my family is not home. But I don't see it happening anytime soon, so here we are. Also, I've had this microphone since the first few videos that I recorded. I just hadn't been using it, going for the lapel mic just because of the limitations of how I was filming. So I don't know. I've gotten mixed results from this sucker, so let's see if it improves anything or not. So that out of the way, on to business. This might be my most controversial video so far. It may be the most controversial video that I will ever make, and I look forward to your measured discussion in the comments. You see, I think that there might be an objective answer to the question of who is the greatest band of all time. Obviously with the limitation of bands that I have actually heard, because there's a lot of them and there's a lot more than there used to be too. I mean, that statement just makes sense because more keep adding, but they're adding them a lot quicker than they used to. So, quick statement, like I said in my friend's video, this isn't my favorite band. I do really like them, but they're not my favorite. You'll just have to take my word on that, I guess. But if I had to pick, my favorite band is probably either Dream Theater, Blindside, or the Silver Sun Pickups. So, how do I land on being the best band objectively? With science! Kind of, maybe. A little. So, I believe that there is a list of potential criteria that bands need to meet to be great. It's a long list, so very few will check off a lot of them, but the more that a band manages to check off, the better the band. And adding all those up together will give us a score. So, let's see how some of the popular greatest ever contenders do against it and score against each other. We're going to go with the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, and Nirvana. So before we really get going, one criteria that is missing, oddly, is writes good songs. And that's because that's really hard to quantify. It's often very much in the ear of the listener. As an example, I love the song Iris, and I consider it to be an absolutely incredible song, and I know someone who actually doesn't like it. Yes, he is crazy. So in no particular order, here's the criteria. 1, writes all of their own material. Shockingly, some don't meet this. Did you know that Heart didn't write Alone, which is probably their biggest hit? It's weird, right? The Beatles definitely get this one. Nirvana obviously gets this one. They didn't write The Man Who Sold the World, which was one of their larger hits, but that was acknowledged as a cover, so it doesn't count against them. Led Zeppelin, they wrote a lot of their own songs, but I don't know if any band has been accused of plagiarism more than they have. So I don't think I can give them a point here. Just avoid the controversy altogether. No points. Number 2, a distinct sound. This is the most obvious one. You're not even a band worth mentioning if you're not unique in some way. But this one has kind of different degrees to differentness. A band can be unique at the time that they come out, but then they're like really popular and people start to copy their sound, and they eventually just sound like a lot of other people through no fault of their own, just a victim of their own popularity. I mean, Blink-182 was a very new thing at first when they showed up, but then after not too long, just about everyone sounded like them for several years. Van Halen was unlike anything anyone had ever heard at first, but once the 80s hair bands were in full swing, their music didn't quite sound as different from everybody else as it used to. But sometimes a band comes along that is so different that no one manages to sound like them at all ever. Like the Stray Cats. They were just never popular enough for people to try to copy them. Nirvana had a unique sound at first, so we'll definitely give it to them. The Beatles... Okay, this one's tricky. The Beatles were unique. No one wrote songs like they did, but there was no real point where you would hear the music from a Beatles song and immediately know that this is a Beatles song. So because of that, I don't think I can give this to them. Might get a little angry at that, but I'm okay with that. Led Zeppelin was extremely unique at the time as well, but they also didn't have a sound that made something a Led Zeppelin song. They and the Beatles were unique in their skills and their approach to song composition. No one could write songs the same way they did. But there wasn't anything about them that announced their presence in a new to you song. Yes, there's definitely something that you can argue against that with Led Zeppelin, but that's coming up with number 3, a unique singer. By this I mean someone with a unique voice. You hear the voice and you immediately know what the band is. Freddie Mercury, Sting, Roger Daltrey, Dennis DeYoung, Steve Perry, Hayley Williams, Pat Benatar, Ann Wilson all have voices that you recognize one note in. On this list is not going to be unique musicians because usually you have to be pretty versed in the instrument to notice that. Guitarists recognize John Frusciante's playing, but most people probably think every iteration of the Red Hot Chili Peppers sounds exactly the same. I can actually recognize a Who song by Keith Moon's drumming, but I doubt that that's something that many people that don't know a lot about the drums can do. The Beatles don't get a point here. The band members had fine voices, but there was nothing stand out about them. Led Zeppelin definitely gets a point because you could hear Robert Plant's voice in a choir. Kurt Cobain, also an instantly recognizable voice, so point to Nirvana. Number 4, a quality singer. This one is almost required. There are almost no great bands with bad singers, though there are exceptions, like AC/DC and Nirvana. Kurt Cobain isn't bad, he's just less than okay. No range, not what you'd call a great tone, just very, Here come the comments. Robert Plant has an incredible voice, as do John Lennon and Paul McCartney, so points to both of them. Number 5, quality musicians. I will argue that this one gives bonus points based on how many of the musicians are really good. For example, Dream Theater would score really high because all of its members are classically trained virtuosos. AC/DC scores really low because only their guitarist would be difficult to replace. Sorry to pick on AC/DC. Yeah, no, I'm not. The Beatles only had one great musician, George Harrison. Lennon and McCartney were perfectly competent, but there was nothing particularly standout or difficult about the music that they played. So, 1 point to the Beatles. If you think that they've been slighted, there's a category coming later to make up for this. Just hold on. Nirvana had Dave Grohl, who's great, but they also had Kurt, who was just okay, and Chris, who just played the bass note of what Kurt did most of the time. There's actually an argument to be made that he damaged the future of bass playing for a little while. So, 1 point to Nirvana. Zeppelin, 3 points. John Paul Jones could play circles around McCartney and Novoselic, and Page and Bonham are two of the most influential people in their instrument. Good lyrics. This feels like it would be subjective, but we all recognize really good lyrics versus just relatable lyrics. It always rains like hell on the Losers' Day Parade is a dang good line, and we all know it. Even when songs don't make sense to us, we can tell that there's something deeper behind some lyrics than others. You've gone to the finest school, alright Miss Lonely, but you know you only used to get juiced in it. Definitely has a deeper meaning than it's a cool place and they say it gets colder. You're bundled up now, wait till you get older. But the meaning of man beg to differ, judge and find the hole in the satellite picture. It does have a really good rhythm to it though. Everyone gets a point for this one. I'm tempted to give the Beatles 3 because they had 3 good lyricists, but I don't think that having more people that can write good lyrics has as much of an impact on the band's quality as having more good musicians does. Quality compositions. This is different from Wright's good songs. This is more about the complexity of the music. Are the drums just playing a basic beat? Is the bass just playing the low end of the guitar? Is the bass just a chord tracker? How many times do they use the 4-chord chord progression? Do their melodies just follow the guitar riffs? The Beatles obviously get a check mark here, as do Led Zeppelin. Nirvana, no. They might have managed if Kurt had lived longer, but he didn't, and their music remained pretty straightforward. Kurt came out with really good melodies and occasionally interesting chords while finger-picking, but that's not really enough for what I'm looking for here. He wrote good songs, but that's not what this category is. Catchy melodies. This is also different from good songs because I think that this is actually objective. We all know a catchy melody when we hear one because it's all that we hear for several hours afterwards. It needs to be achieved over a number of songs though, because some bands have stumbled into catchy and then never found it again. The Beatles clearly get a point, as does Nirvana, but I don't know if I've ever had a Led Zeppelin song stuck in my head, so no points to them. Influential. The greatest bands leave an impact. The Beatles have the highest score in history on this one, and it's why people have trouble arguing for any other band as the greatest ever. I am really trying though. Led Zeppelin took what the Beatles had done and mixed it with the blues to create modern rock as we know it. Nirvana single-handedly ended the hairband era and created the sound of 90s music. So, 2 points to the Beatles for influencing everyone, 1 for Zeppelin, and Nirvana for just influencing most people. Okay, so that's 9. I feel like I should come up with a 10th on principle. Oh, duh. Just uniqueness. It may not be distinct, but it's unduplicatable. Even if other people imitate them, there's something missing, some mysterious X factor. As an example, like I said, Van Halen was not as unique sounding as they were when they started once everybody kind of started to imitate them. But there was still something different about Van Halen's playing that made them stand out from everybody else. This one's kind of a no-brainer. I really don't expect many of the great bands to not score here, so points for everyone. Okay, so let's look at the scores here. Zeppelin and the Beatles have both scored 9, and Nirvana has 8. I think that I'm going to be told that I lowballed the Beatles on 5, but this is my video. So, now let's look at my contender. Obviously they win, or I wouldn't have bothered to make this video, but we're pretending. So, who was my selected band? Yes. That is the name of the band. I do have to clarify here because Yes is one of those long-standing bands with multiple lineups, and I'm specifically talking about the Lightning in a Bottle lineup they had in 1971 and 1972. John Anderson, Steve Howe, Chris Squire, Rick Wakeman, and Bill Bruford. That is a crazy brief period of time, but they released 2 albums in that span because bands used to be prolific. If you want to check my work, those 2 albums are Fragile and Close to the Edge, so let's see how they score. Write all of their own material. Yes, did. Please don't turn off the video. I swear that's the only time I'll do that. Unique sound. No one sounds like this iteration of Yes. Not even other Yes albums. Anytime I've played these for someone who hasn't heard them before, their reaction is, this is different. One guy said, and I quote, "This is the weirdest song I've ever heard." I like it. Unique singer, John Anderson has a very distinct voice. I can recognize him in anything. Quality singer, Anderson's range is incredible, and his control has actually improved as he's aged. It's kind of shocking, really. Quality musicians, I'm pretty sure that every band member, including John Anderson, was classically trained. Even if they weren't, though, they're all virtuosos who influenced their instruments for years. Steve Howe was one of the first people to play classical guitar in a rock song. Quality lyrics, Yes is some of the most poetic lyrics ever written. Sometimes they sound more like poems than song lyrics. Quality compositions. Some of their songs sound more like orchestral pieces, and they didn't even multi-track their instruments most of the time. It's just 4 guys playing their hearts out. I didn't stack this list in Yes's favor, and as proof of that, their melodies are not catchy. They have a couple of moments that might get stuck in your head, but there are no catchy verses or choruses, so no points to them for this round. Influential. The Beatles changed music with their approach to engineering. Led Zeppelin and Nirvana steered the direction that rock music took for their respective decades. Yes invented a genre of music. If you don't know, it's called progressive rock, and no one had ever done anything like them before. Their approach was essentially, what if we wrote rock songs the way Mozart might have? Beatles get a bonus point for influencing everyone, but I'm tempted to do the same for Yes because inventing an entire genre puts them in the same category as the trinity of Elvis, Ray Charles, and Buddy Holly. But I shall resist lest you accuse me of bias. So just 1 point. Uniqueness. Yeah, obviously. So, 12 points. Even if I gave extra points to the Beatles for Lennon and McCartney's skills as musicians, they'd still be 1 point behind. Alright, so that's the whole video. Please be nice in the comments because I think that there can be some fun discussions down there. I mean, using my system, do any bands score higher? I think we can set in stone that only the Beatles get 2 influence points, and we're only talking about bands, no solo artists. Well, thanks for watching, and you'll see me next time if you subscribe. Bye.